Welcome to Northwoods Kindred. I'm your Gothi Bodvarr, and on this channel we discuss all things asatru kindred related. So hit that subscribe button if you want to see how we do it in the Northwoods. Coming up in this video, we're going to build ourselves our brand new sounding horn. So we can signal to our kinsmen when we need help. Coming up. Oh, it has a vent hole. Kind of flat. Well, they don't have a lot of choice here today, do they? That one's thick. It does have a hole, but I can show you how to fix that. I think that's where we'll go. It's too solid. So I can tell by the weight. I want to see if it's too solid down here because I don't want to have to trim it all the way back in order to drill through it. This one feels pretty hollow. And it's thick, so if I want to do any design carved in it, I can. But it's got a couple little holes. Wormholes or whatever. But I'll show you how to fix that in a minute. So first thing before we start building sounding horns is we should probably know what they're for. So they are a ancient, form of communication on the battlefield or anywhere else. Probably had a signal plan. Certain beeps and bleeps and blasts mean certain things. So they were definitely. This is a, prehistoric cell phone for all intents and purposes. So we use them here in the Northwoods. You've seen us use them during ritual. We sound the four corners. We send them on their merry way after the ritual. So we use them a lot, but also we're working on a strategy where every person in the kindred has their own sounding horn, and we have a signal plan that we can say if we need help or if we're off doing something or any number of different things in our signal plan. So everybody would have their own horn, and each horn would have kind of its own voice, and you could know who that signal was just because you recognize the voice, just as you recognize my voice when I'm speaking. You can do that. You can learn that over time, and we thought that would be a really neat practice. But first, we have to make horns. Now this one right here is one that I made years ago, and it's actually my elk bugle. So the mouth hole on it's larger than your traditional sounding horn because I use it as an elk bugle, and I can also signal if I got an elk down. And the reason I bowed these ends in is they give it a little more back pressure, and they help it with that resonance tone. Another of my personal horns is this ram horn, and I got it to make one of the little flute things, but it didn't work out well, and then I had to fill in all of this area where I drilled holes before. I'll show you how to do that in a little while if you stick around. But it didn't make the musical instrument that I wanted, but it made a beautiful sounding horn. So it does have a good sound. It's a really nice horn, so it's definitely not a waste. But you can see the difference between the two mouthpieces. Now, they both serve different purposes, but they both sound amazing. They both sound just fine. So you can see that as I discuss how to make the mouthpiece, it's not as critical as you might think. There's a lot of room for error in there. You just got to kind of work it until it sounds right. So ultimately, where we're trying to start is with the shape of a trumpet mouthpiece. That's what we're really going for here. If you can approach that shape, then you can sort of tune it to match the particular horn. Now this horn wasn't any bigger than this one initially, but I found this really large horn that was thin and it didn't serve a lot of purpose, so I lopped it off, boiled it to make it soft, and then slid it on and kind of hammered it in place, and it filled out the shape itself. So this is almost like an amplifier bell for a horn of a more traditional size. And this is our moot horn, or our ritual horn. This is the one you always see us using during our formal rituals in the Veg. So this is the Kindred horn. We went into Tandy Leather today on the way home and picked up this little cute 12. So it's smaller than a standard one. So that means it's probably going to have a higher pitched tone. And then in contrast, I have this bad boy, which I will eventually carve into a new sounding horn for the Kindred. We won't do this one today. We'll just concentrate on a personal horn for signaling and ritual. So we know the trumpet mouthpiece is ideally what we're going for. And then, of course, we have a lot of margin of error in there. In fact, this one will just fit right in there. Now, the reason we start here, we got to tune it out, because this is going to sound really weird in this horn. I'll show you. If we made this exactly like this, that's what it would sound like. Versus. So this is only your starting point. Once it makes noise, you can grow that hole in the middle and create a deeper, more resonant tone. We never want to stop with this. This is only the starting point. So our first step in carving a horn is to know how deep it is. And you can't guess. You can't be like, there it is. You have to do some sort of a measurement. Now what I have here is just some copper wire. You can use the coat hanger, a little flexi bendy ruler, anything you can. You want it to be more wire-like so it can get all the way down to the deepest possible point on the horn. And then we're going to kind of tweak the wire just a little until it sort of matches the inside, the shortest distance inside curve. So it matches that pretty close, I think we can see, right? So once you've matched the inside curve, you're just going to use your hand as a ruler, and you're going to slide it along the bottom of that inside curve until it stops, and then bring it all the way down, bend it into match, and then pinch it with your finger. If I hold it there, now I can see along that inside curve just how deep that deepest spot is. It's going to be somewhere in there. So I want to hold this and I want to mark it. Now, if you're going to some place that might have horns, like a Tandy Leather or an animal parts store or something like that, by all means bring a wire so that you can check the horns, because you can't always tell by how heavy it is. Some horns are hollow all the way to the tip almost, and some horns are solid all the way back this far. So you really want to be able to get the horn that's in that range. You kind of want that hollow to end somewhere in here. If you can get one like this where the hollow ends at about the thickness of a quarter, you're in really, really good shape. This one's actually a little small. We're gonna have kind of a small mouthpiece on this, but that's okay because I'll probably give it to my daughter. So now that I know how deep it is, I've got a good guess here. I'm gonna go ahead and give myself about a good solid inch. And that's where I'm gonna lop it off, because I wanna make sure that once I drill through and drill my sound hole, I can still have enough meat here to carve out my mouthpiece, my sounding piece. In fact, I could go a little bit farther. Now I've seen some horns where this solid piece was so deep you couldn't even get a drill through it. You had to keep taking pieces off to get far enough to get a drill through. But this is a good horn to demonstrate. The issue is, here I might be cutting it close on not having enough horn, if I go with that line. Might be cutting it close on not having enough horn to get a good solid mouthpiece before it enters into the hollow. And if I go too far down here, it might not be big enough around in order to form a mouthpiece in the first place. But I'm going to err on the side of caution and work my way towards it. You can see there's a little tiny star in the middle. That's pretty much dead center on the horn the way it formed. So that's where I'm going to start drilling, is right straight there, and try and go straight in. If you visualize the horn tip and put as much meat around it as possible, I want to go straight to the center of that. That's the best guess. So you want to be cautious about how you do that. You don't want to run your drill out the side like that. It's okay to err a little bit down towards the bottom because you're eventually going to hit that sound hole. But if you have to really pay attention to all angles, or you can blast through accidentally like that before you actually hit the point where the sound hole is. I generally start with a 1/4 inch hole and then form a mouthpiece and then widen it until I get the tone I like. And this is the most critical hole because this is the first one I'm going to drill, and if it's off, I'll never get it back. If you're not super confident with it, you can always go with a smaller drill and drill just like a teeny tiny pilot hole for this larger 1/4 inch to follow, but I think I'll do okay here. Now I got me a leather sandbag here, but you can use whatever you got. I use this to hold awkward shaped objects where I can put some pressure on them. So now that I've got a good bit of this hole started, now I can really dog down on it and put some pressure in. Sometimes it hangs up right as it breaks through, so that's what just happened. Which I'm pretty happy about because that means I have a little bit more here to work with than I expected. Next thing we're going to do is hollow out this mouthpiece. Now, you got to use what you got. So I use a saw, you can do it by hand. I use a drill. Mouthpiece, generally I used to carve them out with a Dremel tool, but I've gone to this deburring tool on an air ratchet just because you get a higher RPM. It's a little bit harder to use. I would certainly say that if you're new at this or if you have limited tools, I would chuck up some big old fat drill bit and then make your starter hole, a 1/4 inch deep or whatever, and then fine tune it with the Dremel in order to give it that trumpet mouthpiece shape. Just start with something like that as opposed to something that's nice and round, but this is where I'm going to go. This is where this sandbag comes in handy for me, is that I can manipulate it and hold awkward items like this. So now that part's done, I'll show you that that's not much of a mouthpiece, but it's starting to take the same shape that we're looking for. So this end right here is so sharp, it'll sound. I mean, this will make a sound, but it's so sharp it's not a comfortable mouthpiece. So we're going to grind it back a little bit to make it thick, and then chase it down with this ball, and then grind it back and chase it down until we get one that's got enough meat. But we're careful and cautious because we can see how thick the horn is. We want to make sure we don't let that gap between the actual sound chamber and the mouthpiece, we want to make sure that we don't let that gap get too small. So we're going to keep carefully chasing it and checking it and chasing it and checking it, and then when we get the mouthpiece to where it's comfortable, that's where we're going to stop, because we're going to tune up the sound after that. So even at this early stage, it's probably going to sound a lot like the trumpet. So it's got a little ways to go, and what's really cool is this has got a couple of wormholes in it. And when I just made that sound, I could feel the air coming out of that hole on the hair on my arm. So we are going to have to patch that hole up soon. I just have any old dull belt on here. It really doesn't matter. It's not going to burn this or anything. I'm going to throw this box down here, hoping that I can capture some of this dust, because I can use that horn dust later to fill the holes in. So. So I took it back almost to that original line. So we gave ourselves some room for error, and now we're using that up. Now I can see down in that hole that I still got a good ways to go before I get to that sound chamber, and you can tell it's got to get a little thicker. You can see it smoking a little bit too. And now you can do the same thing, but you can do it with saws or sanders or your hand or disc sanders or a grinder, whatever you have, whatever you can make work. Ultimately, we're just going to trim it down a little bit, reshape it, trim it down a little bit, reshape it until we find that mouthpiece that's fairly comfortable. So now, going back and forth a few times and being delicate with it, I've created a trumpet mouthpiece. And it didn't go all the way to the line, so it looks like that line should actually be lower down here. Better to err on the side of caution. Worked out really good. And now we're making sound. So now we're going to fine tune that sound. But before we do that, there's a little bit of a crisp edge because we bored it out essentially with a perfectly round ball. So we just want to take a little bit off that edge because it's actually kind of sharp. It's not going to cut your lip, but it's not really comfortable either. So I'm using a deburring tool, but you can use sandpaper or anything else you have. Way better. All right, so now I'm just going to open that hole up a little bit and see if I can't get a little bit better pitch out of it. We started with a quarter, so we'll go up 2 sizes to 9/32. Getting a little difficult to sound, so I don't want to go any larger than that. I just want to figure out how to use what I have. So that's going to be the sound of this horn. Now it might improve a little bit when I fill in these holes, but that's as deep of a tone as I'm going to get out of this horn. The only way to get a better tone is I can manipulate the ends. Maybe that would work. Or add a bell, another attachment to it. But remember, this is a personal sounding horn, and the idea is that we can communicate to other people various drills or alarms or needs, and this is going to have its own voice that people are going to recognize. Hey, that's somebody's horn. You know, they're going to know whose horn it is, just like their voice. Because all horns have a different sound. So generally speaking, the smaller the horn, the higher the tone. Let's fill in these holes real quick. Now, in order to fill in these little pinholes, I'm going to need some material to put in them. So the first thing is I saved the horn tip when I cut it off, so I'll just grind that down and make more horn dust. And if I need more, I have a horn tip from a previous horn. Never throw away a horn tip. I also have remnants and scraps from various horn-handled knives that I've built, so I can probably use this stuff to get enough material to fill in those little wormholes on that horn. Now we're going to patch these holes. You can see there's a hole there. It goes pretty deep, definitely into the sounding chamber. That one, yeah, all the way into the back wall. And then I have one more up front. You can see all the way through. And that might be it. First, need to make horn dust. All right, Now I think I wore it down to a point where I'm comfortable throwing it away as scrap. One thing that you're probably not going to be prepared for is the smell of the horn and the horn dust. So if you want to just kind of mentally prepare yourself for it, put on a pair of wool socks, you go on like a 5-mile hike, and then when you get home, clip your toenails and then burn those toenails. And that's going to be what it smells like. So for the big hole, I'm going to put a piece of tape on the inside just to keep my patch from going through. Now keep in mind, this is a functional patch, okay? So I'm repairing this so that it's functional. I'm not concerned about what it looks like. If you were carving a horn and you accidentally carved into it, or you were carving a horn and you hit an air pocket or a wormhole or something like that, and you wanted to repair it, you would actually have to get your dust from the same color of horn. So you'd have to get it from either the tip or the rim or someplace close to the same color if you wanted it to kind of match. And then you can go back and do some dye job. I'm not concerned about what color it turns out. I just need the horn to be solid. And then I'm just gonna fill this hole with horn dust. You can do this if you accidentally drill through your horn. For any reason, if there's a hole in your horn, you can do this to repair it. And truthfully, you could use baking soda instead of this horn dust. You could use baking soda, you could use sawdust, real fine sawdust. Pretty much anything as a binder. So we're gonna start there. Now the hole is pretty full. My finger's on the inside holding it. I packed it in there fairly tight. And now I'm gonna put a drop of CA glue. CA, that's contact adhesive. I'm using Zap-A-Gap because I have it in my shop because I'm a knife maker, but you can use Crazy Glue or Super Glue or the dollar store version, it doesn't matter. I just wanna put a little drop in there. Yeah, it should soak right down into that hole. Now the super glue's dry, so it looks like I could still use a little bit. I want to make it a little proud, so I'm going to put another drop on there, let it spread out a little, and then I'm going to use a little bit of this dust and just kind of sprinkle. Let that dust just soak up any of it. Leave that for a second. Maybe I could pat it down or whatever. And so now it's dry and it's proud. You could use a little bit more, I think, but then when I'm done, I can sand it out and it'll be flush with the horn. The color's going to be off a little bit, but the hole is sealed. Now it has that bump and it's very proud, so once I sand that down, it'll be nice and flush with the horn, and you'll likely barely be able to tell. Now I just have to do these other two smaller holes. I want to make sure that there's no loose debris or pieces in there. What is that? What is that? Just something fluffy. Huh. Weird. Like a little cocoon for whatever worm ate a hole through it. Please don't be an alien. Please don't be an alien. Please don't be an alien. Okay, I found the end. Now we're gonna do this one a little different because I can't really get a piece of tape down there, and this hole is now bigger than I expected it to be. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the glue in first. Let it soak the hole inside, and we're gonna add this little by little. Let it soak in there a little and then dry up whatever's left on top. Now all three holes are patched. I can take that tape out of the inside. I'm gonna let those cure for a while before I sand on them. Make sure that that super glue hardened up just fine. There's that, and we'll see if the sound changed a little. I doubt it did, but we'll see. Not bad. A little 220. I'm just gonna sand them off and try and get them flush. And if there's any little bad spots or pit holes in it or something, I can always reapply. So you can see down in here it's a little rough. This could have a reapplication. You could go in there. If you were carving on this horn, you could probably do another application of super glue on there. But overall, the repair doesn't look horrible compared to the fact that it's a horn. And if you were carving it or painting it or doing something, you would never notice at all. But the point is, that's a permanent repair, and it didn't take anything more than a little bit of cheap super glue to get it done. So I redid this one again, and now you can see how smooth it is. There's nothing catching on. It's 100% smooth. It looks like a scar, but it doesn't look horrible. I mean, it is a natural horn. And then we have these two at the bottom. There are good, solid, permanent repairs. Like I said, the color's off a little bit. If you really wanted the color to match, you would have to use only dust from this part of the horn. But we don't really care. And there's the repair, and there's the sounding horn. From this point forward, you can sand it, you can polish it. This is a nice horn. It's really thick. You could carve on this, do something really cool with it, and you'd have a nice little, sounding horn you can keep in your pocket and alert your kinsmen when you're in trouble. So that, in a nutshell, is how you make yourself a sounding horn. You can use a big horn or a little horn. The process is exactly the same on every one. Now, I'll leave it up to your ingenuity and your own wit and tool capability to figure out how to polish, sand, paint, carve, or whatever else you want to do with it to make it beautiful. But as far as function goes, this is as functional as it gets. So that's the basics of how to build yourself a functional sounding horn. If you want to know how to do the other stuff, the carving, the polishing, that kind of a thing, check out that video right here. I got you. Don't forget to share this video with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed already, now would be a really good time. I'll see you guys on the next one. Thor Vigi, my friends.